This video is brought to you by my new book, Mouth of Winter, a direct follow-up to my previous novel, Dullbloods. If you're looking for something new to read or want to see what happens to John Kettle next, then feel free to check it out. Links are in the description. Well, it's gosh darn happened again. I've got too many games on my radar and not enough time to give them the full reviews they deserve, so I don't have a choice but to do a Backlog Showcase instead. Hooray! Alright, jokes aside, this showcase features two games I was planning to do full reviews of, as well as others that have caught my eye and eaten up my time. These are all drastically different to one another, and some of them were games I planned to review going as far back as 2024. So let's get this started with one of the hottest PC releases of 2024, Stellarblade.
We're gradually seizing the initiative of the war.
Now I won't lie. If you played Nier Automata, then you've already seen Stellarblade's story, since it takes very liberal inspiration from it. Post-apocalyptic Earth, humans living in space, fighting to liberate the planet from an inhuman threat, a hidden truth behind the origin of the threat, and the cause for the liberation, and of course, a heroine with a nice ass. However, wearing your inspirations on your sleeve doesn't mean you're bad or unoriginal. Stellarblade's art direction is superb and stands out, with even background NPCs looking memorable while the main enemies, the Naytiba, are creative and distinct in their designs, being biomechanical fusions of human and animal forms and engineering mechanisms. It reminded me of Warframe combined with anime, and I won't lie, I'd love to buy the game's art book, but the characters themselves are rather bland and flat. What you see is what you get with the protagonist Eve. She reacts to everything new with the same flat wonder or curiosity. Even when things are getting serious, she doesn't show much emotional range. So while the game's art direction is one of its best strengths, the story isn't. But that doesn't mean it's bad, just not great. And considering the developers Shift Up have mainly worked on mobile games, and this is their first narrative-driven action title, it's understandable they'd be lacking in at least one area. Combat, though, is fantastic. We get a good selection of combos and special abilities with plenty of upgrades and counterattacks to unlock. Make it as wide as a lake, but as deep as an ocean. But what really makes it fantastic is how the game demands concentration from the player. You have to pay attention to enemy animations and visual cues if you want to effectively block, dodge, and counter, and it takes genuine skill and practice to pull off parries, which you will want to do since if you parry an enemy enough times in a row, then you take them down with a finisher, which is always satisfying to pull off. The bosses are fun to fight as well, and offer some decent spectacle, but I should stress, Stellarblade is not a Souls-like. While the game isn't afraid to offer some decent challenge, it doesn't go out of its way to be as ball-bustingly hard as Dark Souls. The game's technical performance, though, is the real ball-buster for how far you'll go. At least for me. See, this game does run well. I didn't experience any technical hiccups or glitches during my time with it when I wasn't capturing footage. When I was, oh sweet Jesus. The frame rate would hitch so constantly that not only would it screw with the game's audio, but also cause input lag. Together, these two made the game a chore to play, and the reason I'm not giving Stellarblade a full review. To make it more frustrating, the game would run smooth for a while after I start recording, only for the performance to nosedive. I'll let the footage from this boss fight speak for itself.
Very good.
Technical problems aside, the only other complaint I have is that the music and the open world elements are disappointing. The music I found to be rather forgettable compared to its primary inspiration, and when the game opens up and lets you explore its open areas, it feels really slapdash and ill thought out. Like the devs just threw a bunch of random enemies and locales without care or concern for narrative or logic. This feels all the more obvious when you compare it to the more structured and thought out linear areas. Those are just more fun to play through. Now, Asylum is a type of game I've never had much interest in until Season 1 of Telltale's The Walking Dead. Point-and-click adventures. This caught my eye because it's the new title from the creator of Scratches, and was taking inspiration from 70s horror like the works of Peter Cushing and Lucio Fulci. Mate, sign me up. I'm down to give it a go, and I have to admit, it's got me wanting to try out more point-and-click horror games now. We play as a man who returns to the abandoned Hanwell Mental Health Institute. He spent time there as a patient, yet he can barely remember anything. So now we've returned just as it's being renovated to try and find answers. And this is a creepy experience. The Institute is brimming with foreboding atmosphere, and it feels like anything could jump out at any moment. And sometimes that's what happens. It honestly makes me wish this had FPS controls rather than point-and-click navigation, just so I could thoroughly explore it. The conversation mechanic is interesting and has some solid dialogue, so when we talk to an NPC, it feels like we're actually investigating clues, even if at the core you're just going through a checklist one by one. The puzzles are also creative and demand the player pay attention to clues and piece things together themselves. But there are some cases where you have clues that are misleading and will have you banging your head against a wall.
She made me feel happy. That is everything that matters.
Case in point. There's a puzzle where we can't get through a dining hall because a patient is in there and he's gone schizo, so we need to play a song over the PA system to calm him down. The two biggest clues are a toy in his cell and a record sleeve. Thing is, there's 3 records we can play and each of them holds multiple songs, but only one has a sleeve that you can find. So naturally, you'd think, play the record that matches the sleeve. But no! What you're supposed to do is play a different song on a different record, and you're supposed to just find it through trial and error. This isn't the case with all of the puzzles, but there will be times where you get frustrated, stop thinking, and just go through all your clues and items one by one until you guess right. When you get through those low moments, you're back to playing through one hell of an enjoyable experience that takes you through the darker recesses of the human mind. At least until you hit another low moment, and then it's back to frustration for a bit. Robocop Rogue City was a surprise hit by Teon, the creators of Rambo the video game and Terminator Resistance, a slow plonking shooter that was faithful to its source material from the presentation to the gameplay. They followed it up with the standalone expansion, Unfinished Business, a shorter, more linear experience that doesn't try to reinvent the wheel, but just give more of what you liked, with a few new bells and whistles thrown in to boot. If Rogue City was Robocop 2.5, then Unfinished Business is Robocop 2.7. Mercenaries have taken over the Omni Tower apartment complex, and now Robocop has to fight his way through hordes of gunmen to reach their leader, who has a connection to Robo back when he was still Alex Murphy. It's more balls-to-the-wall authentic 80s action, with some DNA from the Raid mixed in. But like the main game, during the downtime, the game offers smaller side stories you can engage with. These include things like giving a kid advice for drawing his sister as a cop, settling a dispute between 2 junkies, help a laundry worker open a washing machine, and assisting with a scientist's funeral. These not only break up the action, but add to the authenticity of the game's setting, making Omni Tower feel like a real lived-in megacity block with more than just crime, grime, and chaos.
Gotta go. Those lab coats won't dry themselves.
What's more is that since we're up against trained mercenaries rather than drugged up thugs, Unfinished Business is a tougher experience than Rogue City. They wear body armor, so they can soak up a fair bit of damage, and they're backed up by an array of drones and katana-wielding androids. But Robo has an impressive arsenal to deal with them, from his auto pistol, to special abilities, environmental hazards, takedowns, and the all-new Cryo Cannon, which is basically an ice-fueled BFG, and it is never not fun to turn enemies into icy poles. With the harder difficulty, you have to make appropriate use of these to get our firefights mostly unscathed and walk away feeling awesome. We also get these flashback segments where we play as Murphy back when he was still a meatbag. These play like a stripped-down Call of Duty where you have to rely on cover and play more cautiously. They're a nice change of pace and serve as a nice counterbalance to Robo's plonking, tanky gameplay. The game also ran well most of the time. Every once in a while, the game's frame rate would crash or it would stutter with egregious pop-in. These usually happen during area transitions or during dialogue sequences. They weren't enough to ruin the experience, since these never happened in the thick of the action, but they were frequent enough to make me raise an eyebrow when they did. I wasn't interested in Sonic X Shadow Generations when it came out. I played Sonic Generations back in high school when it released and I enjoyed it. Hell, I've still got my copy for Xbox 360, but then on Boxing Day 2024 I decided to go see the third Sonic movie. Loved it, remembered X Shadow Generations had come out, and decided to buy it. Never had I been so glad to make an impulse purchase. Outside of some story and cinematic tweaks, which may annoy purists, the remastered version of Sonic Generations is identical to the original release, but the new Shadow expansion, that made the $75 price tag worth it. Or $90 if you grab the deluxe edition like I did. Shadow Generations isn't just a glorified expansion pack that's bundled with Sonic Generations. It's an all-new game with its own story and mechanics that just so happens to be bundled with the remaster of Sonic Generations. The story focuses on what Shadow was up to during the events of the original release, how he was tempted by a chance to change the fates of Maria and Gerald Robotnik, but that also came with the early revival of Black Doom, who begins manipulating Shadow into becoming the perfect vessel for his true resurrection. The story was written by longtime Sonic writer Ian Flynn, who also wrote the story of Frontiers, and once again, he did a great job, creating a short but impactful story that touches on themes of grief, Faustian bargains, and moving on, all while making it appropriate for an all-ages audience. Keyword there being all ages. The core gameplay remains unchanged from Generations. Boost gameplay is here, but without the classic Sonic gameplay to accompany it. But it does come with some of its own bells and whistles, such as Shadow's new Doom powers he gains as the story progresses. For example, Doom Spear, a projectile attack that lets Shadow deal with enemies from a distance or stun them, and also unlock otherwise inaccessible routes. Doom Surf lets Shadow navigate water with fluid skating motion for quick mobility that's fun to faff about with. And then there's Doom Morph, which turns Shadow into a squid that can freely navigate environments that would otherwise slow him to a crawl, and even grapple off special points to throw himself around, and this ability takes real skill to use effectively. These and more exist on top of his Chaos Control time pause. The biggest change though is to the level hub. Instead of the flat navigational space from the main game, we get a fully open-ended hub that becomes packed with detail and shortcuts the more we progress through the story. Consequently, it also becomes more and more fun to run around as you solve puzzles and hunt down the collectibles to access unlockable extras. Sonic Team used this game as a ripe opportunity to experiment with Frontier's open world design on a much smaller scale, and the result is a hub that's just as much balls of fun to faff about in as the linear levels are to play through. The game also has a great sense of spectacle that absolutely shines during the boss fights, and whenever Black Doom decides to interfere with Shadow. This means that every boss fight is a visual spectacle that is also mechanically interesting, on top of being just awesome to watch unfold. A personal highlight was the fight against Metal Overlord, which focuses on the Doom Surf and environmental interaction. There's also a boss fight that brings back the antagonist of the 2006 game, Mephiles. Now, I haven't reached it yet as of the writing of this script, but I have seen footage of it. That fight has redeemed that character for so many people and showcases some extremely good character writing.
I cannot be stopped! I will not be stopped!
The only other thing I have to say about Shadow Generations is that it comes with one great piece of DLC, the Sonic Movie 3-pack. This adds an all-new level to the game where Shadow is transported to the world of the movies, shortly after the events in Tokyo from the third movie, and they even got Keanu Reeves back to voice him. Granted, Reeves' voice acting is disappointing, and for that I blame the direction he was given, but it's still a nice touch to a great addition that's only brought down by one thing. There's not enough of it. It's such a great level that it left me wanting more. At least 2 or 3, just like all the other areas in the game. And it also had me wonder just why the hell Sega hasn't made at least one tie-in game for the movies. Something experimental that could also expand on their lore, like a Devil May Cry beat-em-up, for example, explaining what Amy was up to before the post-credits scene in the third movie. Cronos The New Dawn was Bloober Team's follow-up to the Silent Hill 2 remake. I was curious about this title because Bloober was open about Silent Hill 2 being the dawn of a new beginning for the studio, where they would do more action-oriented games than just nothing but walking sims. While Cronos definitely used the momentum Silent Hill had built up to great effect, it definitely lost some of it along the way. Cronos draws a strong comparison to Dead Space with its enemies, the Orphans. Humans that have been mutated into rabid biomass by an infection called the Change. But instead of dismemberment, the Orphans have a different gameplay gimmick: assimilation. When the player kills an orphan, the others have a window of opportunity to assimilate their biomass and become a stronger variant. This creates a gameplay loop where the tension is constantly escalating, because every time you revisit an area, you know that if there's a fresh encounter, they have a literal buffet of bodies from the previous ones to feast on. And it only takes a few bodies for a low-level shambler to turn themselves into our boss-level threat. This is alleviated with fire. See, we can burn bodies to prevent orphans from feeding on them, but this also adds to the tension in other ways. Since you need fuel canisters to burn bodies, they don't stack, and fire also has combat applications. Since burning enemies are stunned and under the right conditions, they can take more damage, and fire is also the only way to instantly get out grapple attacks. So you're constantly weighing whether or not to burn a body or two, not knowing if there'll be another encounter near them, or if holding onto the fuel is the better option in the long run. Gameplay-wise, Cronos is a third-person shooter that, when compared to the Silent Hill 2 remake, is rather basic. That game had a melee system inspired by Callisto Protocols, and also had a dodge that was very useful for getting out of a tight spot. In Cronos, our time-traveling traveler doesn't have these. Melee is more like Dead Space's, and while that's not a bad thing, in fact it comes in handy when you need to conserve resources or don't want to waste bullets on shamblers, but the lack of any dodge or dash means it's harder to get out of tight situations with how the orphans behave. This does encourage the player to better weigh their options and consider all possible advantages in the environment, but there's no denying it is annoying when enemies do get the drop on you in situations that even Isaac Clarke could have easily just bolted out of. The shooting though is satisfying with plenty of oomph, and what sets it apart is the charge mechanic. When you hold down the fire button to make the shot more lethal, once maxed out it fires automatically, and this can be a real lifesaver, determining whether or not an orphan needs 4 bullets and 2 punches to the jaw to go down, or just 2 and a caved in skull. Watching the charge meter slowly fill also adds to the moment-to-moment tension, even after you spent some energy to upgrade it to fill faster. The game is also gorgeous. Bloober Team's art team has never disappointed, and this game continues that trend. The post-temporal apocalypse of Poland is beautiful to look at in its desolation. Dreary browns and greys broken up by splashes of red, orange, and flesh, signaling your objectives or narrative elements. Meanwhile, the tech of the collective is a mashup of brutalism and 1980s sci-fi that looks genuinely alien to those not familiar with Eastern European aesthetics. All of this contrasts with the environment of 1980s Poland, which is more humdrum with its added winter snow, but is by no means less beautiful to look at. Earth Defense Force 5 is absolutely batshit bonkers. An unadulterated celebration of campy, B-grade sci-fi with all the sincerity of One Piece that offers 2 things in heaping spades. Balls to the wall insane levels of insecticide that at times put Helldivers 2 to shame, and one hell of a fun audio drama. Each mission is a sandbox of destruction that throws hordes of enemies at you, and these levels are destructible, if they take place in a city. You can blow up every building, which adds to the insanity and the fun, whereas the missions that take place in the countryside or a cave have no destructibility, but they're by no means not fun. Though funnily enough, most of the filler missions tend to take place in caves. What's more is that the maps will change as the story unfolds during the missions. Events will play out as they're being narrated or established, and this can make the mission unpredictable during your first time with them. One example is a mission where you're charging to fight a massive army on an open field, and the artillery accompanying you just unleashes an airstrike to soften the first wave. Or another one where things went wrong in the previous mission, so you start in an indoor car park and have to try to stealthily take out the aliens, and along the way, reconnect with other stranded EDF soldiers as you struggle to survive. The gameplay is also extremely varied across 4 playable classes that do keep things fresh. The Ranger is your vanilla experience that plays like a basic third-person shooter. The Wing Diver can freely fly around the map and is the most mobile. The Air Raider can call in artillery, air support, call in the most powerful vehicles in the game, and pull double duty as either a support class or a sniper. And finally, the Fencer is the game's tank, and once you've unlocked and leveled up his equipment, he can become the most broken class in the game, becoming a miniature Gundam that can solo most missions on the harder difficulties.
This is Gary. Arrived on scene. All guards, enter the air raid area.
The story, which I mentioned before, plays out as an audio drama that's told through radio chatter as you play through the missions. It is the most fun tribute to 50s sci-fi since Tim Burton directed Mars Attacks. It's cheesy, it's silly, it's over the top, and it's not something you'll enjoy if you expect your narratives to be highbrow and intellectual. So in other words, the game journos that gave Dragon Age The Veilguard a 9 out of 10 and Crimson Desert a 6. This is the type of story where you start out fighting giant ants to fighting off alien invaders and ends with you needing to kill God. The kind of fun your average midwit is intellectually incapable of appreciating.
Developing this kind of weapon? The aliens. These weapons can use the human
5,000 aliens are closing in on Beijing.
The last thing I have to say about this game is that it's stable but rough. It runs well even when things get busy, but your mileage will vary depending on hardware. On my desktop, it ran smoother than some of the footage would let you believe, and it ran fine on my Steam Deck, except things when got absolutely batshit bonkers, and the frame rate wasn't as consistent as Earth Defense Force 4's, but never fell below 30 or 40 FPS. There's also a certain amount of jankiness that's innate to this game. It's not a AAA quality game, not even close, and this may lead to some people mistaking the typical EDF experience for the game glitching out, when the truth is that this is an innately janky game that doesn't care that you can't see anything or that you have no idea what's going on, and it's all the better for it because that's what makes it EDF.
Don't have the necessary equipment to destroy that nest. We retreat for now and think of a better plan.
Alright, thank you for checking out this video, I really do appreciate it. If you really liked it and you want to support me, then please hit the like and the subscribe buttons, and also check out Mouth of Winter. It's a really good book, not to toot my own horn. Anyway, coming up next, I've actually got planned to review a Bubsy 4D after that comes out, and I've also got an idea for a Sonic fan game showcase I wouldn't mind doing. I may also do a review of Crimson Desert. I bought that for Anzac Day. I've played a fair bit of it, and I'll admit, I'm actually quite enjoying it. And I've also got another idea for an off-the-cuff video, which I have to be honest, I want it to be the last video I'll do that touches on Sonic, but with how that thing's been running around in my head lately, I can't make any promises in that regard. I've also got some movie reviews I really need to just sit down and hash out. Anyway, I've got all that more coming up, so please stick around.